Let's take a bigger picture of this campaign first and foremost, if you don't mind, because I'm wondering how economic issues has figured into this campaign, whether that's a direct issue or about the perceptions created about each leader.
So I think the economy has been an incredibly important issue in this campaign, and naturally because the province has had a very difficult time over the last few years. It entered a very deep and long-lasting recession in late 2014. That continued for 2 full years of contraction where the economy shrank roughly 20%. And the recovery was still continuing when COVID hit. So it's only now that many economic indicators are back to their pre-recession levels. And so it's been very difficult. And so naturally, that's going to be top of mind for many voters in the province.
And talk to us about how that has, I guess, affected the Notley campaign in particular, because when you listen to the UCP arguments being made, many will point to the economic record of the Notley government and ask openly, is that really what you want to go back to?
Yeah, so a lot of individuals and individual voters do credit governments when economic times are good and do blame governments when economic times are bad on their watch. And so having the UCP paint the NDP as responsible for the recession is, I think, just a natural, political strategy that you could see in any province or any order of government. But, the reality is that regardless of who governed Alberta during 2015 and during 2016, the economic challenges were going to be significant because oil prices fell and stayed low for a very long time, really fundamentally changing the economics of the oil and gas sector and really considerably dropping government revenues, increasing the deficit, rising public debt levels. But that was really not because of any policy choice that the NDP made. But, for better or worse, voters themselves do credit governments when times are good and blame them when times are bad.
Well, beyond that, though, of course, here we are in Alberta, historically voting Conservative in one form or the other. And they do benefit from this perception that they are, quote unquote, better economic stewards than are the NDP or any other opposition, really. Talk to us about how well deserved that reputation is, how hard set that reputation is.
Well, to some extent, government policy can nudge the economy, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, and taxes are a particularly important lever that can either discourage or encourage investment levels and economic growth. And Alberta's benefited from considerable revenues from oil and gas, and that's allowed the province to maintain tax rates that are significantly below the rest of the country, about 1/3 below the rest of the country on average. And so that has potentially increased economic growth, increased GDP in the province, and so that Conservatives historically might be able to claim credit for because they were in government for so long, for over 4 decades prior to 2015. So there might be something there, but relying on oil and gas revenues is risky, very risky, because when oil prices fall, government revenues fall as well, and sometimes by very large amounts. And so there are trade-offs from having taxes as low as they are.
Mm-hmm. Do they deserve that reputation, though?
So I'd say that either party, the policy differences between them are very slight. And so economically, it almost doesn't matter who is going to win come election day, just because of so small of a difference between both parties in terms of taxes, in terms of spending levels. And so I'd say that reputation that Conservatives have in the province as being better economic stewards is potentially undeserved, because a lot of the underlying reason for economic strength in the province goes beyond government policy.
Mm-hmm. So when you look at the economic platforms, as you say, very little difference between the two, but does anything stand out in terms of economic policy that might be beneficial for Alberta, in particular, in this moment in time?
So at this moment, I think it's very interesting to look at government finances and government spending levels, and that's a very important, usually it's a very important differentiating factor between the parties, but here we have the UCP and the NDP roughly committing to spend similar amounts in the coming years. And what we've seen from the UCP in this past budget is a dramatic increase in spending. We've changed premiers, and the former Premier Kenney was planning to spend roughly $10 billion less this year than Premier Smith is planning to spend. And so that's something where usually you'd think there's a difference between Conservatives and NDP in terms of the size of the provincial government. And that's just something that's kind of completely evaporated in this campaign because of the recent budget. And that's interesting to see. Usually you'd think of the province as generally conservative, and I don't actually think it really has that kind of fiscal conservatism to it. You know, it seems like it because oil and gas royalties allows for low taxes, but the province historically does favor large government spending, and we are seeing that now under the UCP as well.